the United Nations. I have long said we should have as little to do with this sinister socialist authoritarian mob as we possibly can. Not content with trying to ruin our economy with the Paris Agreement on climate change, which Malcolm Turnbull and Julie Bishop idiotically ratified. Not content with destroying our free speech through all the ghastly Trigg-style UN human rights agreements. Not content with trying to steal our money and redistribute it to the third world under the fraudulent claim of rising sea levels. Not And not content with that, the UN Relief and Works Agency pumping out generous taxpayers' dollars and overseas aid to radical Palestinian groups teaching Arab kindergarten kiddies how to murder Jews. Not content with patronisingly lecturing us about the Great Barrier Reef or our Indigenous affairs policies, or condescendingly sneering at us about our successful border security policies. No, not content with all of that interference with our rights as a free and sovereign nation, now we learn that the United Nations will dictate to Sydney-siders how much drinking water we can have and tell our newest airport over which houses our aeroplanes will fly. According to an article in yesterday's Weekend Australian, written by top science journalist Graham Lloyd, who we had on this show last year, the United Nations, the world's greatest collection under one roof of moralising busybodies and pontificating hypocrites, is now sticking its noses into how high the wall can be at Warragamba Dam and what the flight paths at Badgerys Creek should be. And the Morrison government is letting them get away with it. According to Lloyd, a UN committee including members from China, Cuba, Uganda, Indonesia and Burkina Faso will oversee key decisions on Sydney's future water supply, flood mitigation and flight paths from our new international airport. Why? Because we made the Blue Mountains a UN World Heritage Site, giving unelected officials from the UN a say over anything that happens to impact the entire area. Remember a couple of weeks ago I mentioned highly paid Canberra bureaucrats were being interrogated at the Bonn climate change fiasco about Australia's gender and Indigenous policies on climate change. Well, this week, you and I paid again through the nose, wait for it, for a 9-member delegation of senior bureaucrats, as well as a 6-person Indigenous delegation, no doubt all flying up the pointy end, to swan around, of all places, Baku in Azerbaijan at a UN World Heritage Conference where the UN committee expressed their concern, about proposals to raise the heights of the Warragamba Dam and the flight paths at Badgerys. There you go. Sydney's supposed to be growing bigger. Yet the UN wants more and more refugees to pour in. On the one hand, they want us to sign the Global Compact or whatever. Thankfully, we didn't. But at the same time, they don't want us to have enough water for everybody who's coming here. The timid politicians quiver in their first-class complimentary moccasins every time the UN raises an eyebrow. According to Lloyd, Australia has agreed to give UN World Heritage Committee members full details of the environmental impact of a planned increase in the height of our dam. And final decision will be made under their auspices. The committee has also requested final flight path data for the new airport to ensure there is no impact. Which translates as, suburban northwest Sydney, you'd better batten down the hatches and get ready for jumbos screaming straight over your backyards, courtesy of the United Nations protecting the Blue Mountains. And naturally, these overpaid pontificating poobahs of the UN represent some of the worst polluting nations on Earth. The madness has to stop. In the same way, the quiet Britons are fighting to free themselves from the socialist stranglehold of the EU, how long will it be before we quiet Australians realise our sovereign independence is constantly being squeezed by the authoritarian tentacles of the United Nations?